Hey everybody, won't it always bored, never boring. Today I'm going Oldhammer with my painting guide because I am painting the unfortunately named Rildo the Thief from the DungeonQuest Heroes expansion. This is a character that begs the question, how big does a knife have to be before it becomes a sword? I'm painting this character in preparation for a playthrough, a full Monty playthrough where I go through DungeonQuest using all of the expansions and 2 of the expansion characters. This is an old metal miniature. I have cleaned it up thoroughly and then I have sprayed it with Chaos Black Primer, and we are starting with the face using CADIAN FLESHTONE. I'm going to put 2 thin coats of this over the face to get a good smooth coverage. Unfortunately, Master Rildo has a face only his mother could love, but we will do the best we can with it. Next I'm switching to MOURNFANG Brown and I'm just going to apply this to his hair. And I'm doing all of the face areas first to get that done, and then we will move on to his clothes and things afterwards. It just means I don't have to be too neat when I'm painting in this hair, and of course any brown will do. I'm then switching to ADMINISTRATUM Grey, and I'm going to put a coat of this over the feather in his hat. And again, I'm doing this feather as one of the first things on the piece because I'm going to be doing some dry brushing here, and if I do it first I don't have to be too neat with the dry brushing or worry about paint going on other areas of the miniature. And if you would like your thief to be more flamboyant, you can obviously go for a nice brightly coloured feather instead. I actually think Rildo is probably inappropriately attired for being a thief. He's a little bit too noticeable. Next I'm switching to Reichland Flesh Shade, and obviously I'm going to apply this wash to the hair and the face. That's going to bring out the details nicely, apply all the shading, make the skin tone a little bit more natural. And then I'm going to switch to Nuln Oil and I'm going to apply a coat of that to the feather. I've actually overloaded my brush here a little bit. If you do that, you can easily just draft your brush and then touch it against the excess wash and it will draw it away from the miniature. So it's never too much of a problem, but it's generally better to try to avoid overfilling your brush in the first instance when you're doing things like this. Next I'm going back to ADMINISTRATUM Grey and we're going to do that dry brush that I mentioned before. This is going all over the feather. It's going to help bring out those details and brighten the feather back up after the wash. Then I'm going to switch to Pallid Witch Flesh and do a final top highlight, again using the dry brush method. And this is really just going on the most raised parts of the feather. I'm going back to MOURNFANG Brown. This isn't an essential thing to do, but I'm just going to very, very carefully pick out the raised areas of the hair. And then I'm switching back to CADIAN FLESHTONE, and I'm going to do the same thing with the face, picking out the raised areas, the nose, the cheeks, the chin, the eyebrows, just to help define all those details. And I will be doing the eyes on this miniature, but I'm going to save those for the end. Next I'm moving on to his tunic, and I'm going to use Incubi Darkness on the collar of the tunic. I'm going to use some various different shades of green here, but I'm trying to keep the whole miniature a little bit darker in its tones because this is supposed to be a thief and I don't want him to look really, really bright and garish. So 2 coats of this Incubi Darkness all over his big collar. Being careful not to get it onto the face or the hair or the feather. And then I'm switching to CALIBAN green and I'm going to paint the rest of his tunic with this. Again, 2 coats for a good coverage. The paint is slightly thinned so we get a nice smooth finish. And then I'm switching to a THONIAN camo shade and I'm going to put a wash of this over all those green areas that I've painted already. And of course this is going to help bring out the recessed shading and enrich the greens, tie the greens together a little bit more, make it all look like part of the same clothing. Next I'm switching to Greenskin, which is an army painter paint, and I'm going to pick out the edge detailing on the collar and around the bottom of the tunic. This is going to take a couple of thin coats, being very, very careful, making sure that I only go over the embossed detailing on the miniature. He has this nice sort of crenellation all the way around his clothing. You don't need to pick this out, but I thought it would be nice to do that. And then I'm going back to CALIBAN green, and this time I'm thinning the paint again and applying it to the raised areas of the main body of the tunic. This is going to highlight those raised areas and help to define all the shading from the wash. And then just for a final highlight, I'm going to put a little drop of the green skin paint into the CALIBAN green, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm thinning the paint slightly, and I'm applying it to the most raised areas. And this will brighten the tunic up a little bit without being too over the top. I'm then switching to Steel Legion Drab, and I'm going to paint in his belt, and also he's got a small backpack or pouch, little thieves' purse, full of jewels and things that he has no right to have. And that will get a coat of this Steel Legion Drab as well. You can probably get away with one coat of this. Steel Legion Drab covers quite nicely. You can see I've switched to a finer brush for this, just to make sure that I don't get any of the brown over the green that I've already finished. With that done, I'm switching to Eshin Grey. Any nice dark grey or even a black will do for this. And I'm going to apply 2 thin coats of this to the boots, and I'm also going to apply it to his gloves and his lovely wide-brimmed hat. I've gone for the nice dark grey to maintain the slightly dark colour palette that I think is fitting for a thief, but you can obviously use whichever colours you want really. And I'm thinning the paint, applying 2 coats again to get a nice smooth finish on this. And then I'm doing something which I later regret. I'm using Administratum Grey to paint the leggings. I've left this bit in the video just to show you what I did and why I ultimately decided to change my mind. So in a minute the legs will change colour, but first I'm going to apply Agrac's Earthshade to the belt and that little bag on his back. I'm using a small brush for this, just to make sure I don't get a lot of Agrac's over the green that I've painted, because I don't want to muddy that up. And then I'm switching to Nuln Oil, and I'm applying this to the boots and the leggings, and the gloves and the hat. And this is the point, as this wash dries, that I decide that I really do not like the light grey leggings, and I decide to change them. This does happen from time to time. I'm not usually keen on changing my colours on the fly, but sometimes I have to do it. So I'm going to switch to Dryad Bark instead, and I'm going to apply a coat of this over all of that Administratum Grey. So he's going to have some nice dark brown leggings instead, and I'm going to use the same Dryad Bark on the handles of his knives. And then I'm getting the Agrac's Earthshade, and I'm going to apply that over the Dryad Bark that I've just added to the miniature, just to bring out any details. I'm then switching back to Eshin Grey, and again I'm thinning this paint slightly, and I'm going to start doing some highlighting on the gloves, the boots and the hat, picking out the raised details. And you might need 2 or 3 passes of this depending on how much highlighting you want to add. But as you can see, I'm focusing on the raised areas, the parts where the light would most naturally fall. And then I'm going back to the Dryad Bark, and I'm doing the same thing on the legs and also on the knife handles. Just picking out the raised details, brightening the colour back up a little bit after the washes have dried. Next up is Leadbelcher, and obviously this is for the blades of his knives. Nice smooth coverage, making sure we don't get anything on the clothing. And then we're going to put some Nuln Oil on those knives, just to tone down the brightness. Make them look a little bit more like naturally used blades. And then I'm getting some Pallid Witch Flesh, and it's time to deal with the eyes. I'm going to thin the paint down slightly, I'm going to brace the miniature, hold my breath, get my small detail brush, and very carefully dot in the whites of the eyes. And then I'm doing the same thing with Abaddon Black, just putting a small dot in each eye. And I find it's easier to try and get the miniature to look slightly off to the side when you're doing this. So I have my miniature looking off towards the left of the camera, and I'm very happy with how that turned out. He has a very serious look about him now. While I have the black out, I'm going to apply a coat of it over the base of the miniature, in preparation for the flagstone design that I'm going to put on it. And while that black is drying, I'm just going to edge highlight the blades with my Leadbelcher, just to bring out those details. When it comes to the base, I'm doing a flagstone pattern which is similar to the one that I used on my HeroQuest miniatures, but rather than grey, we're going for a sort of brown. And we're starting with Steel Legion Drab. I'm thinning this down, and I'm going to block in the flagstone pattern. Once I've blocked in once, I will go back over all these areas again, just to get some nice coverage. And you may find you even want to do 3 coats, depending on how thin your paint is. I have used this technique before, but I do keep changing the paints I use slightly, but I am happy with what I have here. The second coat is Zandri Dust. Again, it's thinned slightly, and I'm going over the areas that I've already blocked out, going almost up to the edge of the Steel Legion Drab, but leaving a small amount of the Steel Legion Drab showing. And we're going to do several thin coats of this again, gradually building up the colour. And then I'm going to add a little bit of Screaming Skull to the Zandri Dust to apply a third colour, and this is going to be the top highlight. And you can see that as I'm applying it to the flagstones, I'm not always completely covering the flagstone, and I'm leaving a little bit of the previous colour showing through to get a nice sort of uneven flagstone finish. And I'm quite happy with how this turns out. The final step to tie all those colours together is a thin coat of Seraphim Sepia over the whole base, and that really will tie all the colours together and gives a result that I'm quite happy with and will be using for all of my Advanced Hero Quest and Dungeon Quest pieces. And with that Seraphim Sepia dry, this miniature is finished. You can see the final result here. I'm very happy with that indeed. It just needs a coat of varnish, which is very important, particularly for metal miniatures, as the paint is more likely to chip on metal miniatures. But then once that is all done, he is ready for use in Dungeon Quest for a playthrough that I hope to be showing on the channel very soon. But that is it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you've really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.